before we begin, I appreciate we have a very big crowd here. It is going to be very important that we keep it quiet. We're going to hold questions till after we're done so that everybody can really hear and pay attention to what's going on. So as you know, we're talking about the issue of same-sex marriage, but what I decided to do was sort of change the name of the talk-up to hashtag Same Love. Why? Because we're all familiar, I'm sure, with that very popular song by the Seattle hip-hop artist Macklemore called Same Love. Very, very popular now. In fact, it is number 11 on the Billboard chart. It has sold over 1 million copies, gone platinum, and it deals with the topic of homosexuality and gay marriage. And what I want to do is sort of look at the topic of gay marriage by sort of analyzing Macklemore's song, because what I see in looking at it, if you pay attention to the lyrics, that he uses a lot of the phrases and slogans that are popular in this debate. So what we want to do is look at the song lyrics and try to ask some questions, some thought-provoking questions about what he says so that we can better think about this topic and further dialogue about it. Because it is a very hotly debated topic and we need to be able to have reasoned and rational discussion about it. So first of all, let's look at some of the positive things that we see in the song. The song is not all that bad. It's got a good catchy beat. I think Mary Lambert has a very, very good voice. He talks at the beginning about the dangers of stereotyping. So I'm not going to rap the lyrics for you. I'm not a rapper. But I'll read him. He says, "When I was in the 3rd grade, I thought that I was gay because I could draw, my uncle was, and I kept my room straight. I told my mom, tears rushing down my face. She's like, 'Ben, you've loved girls since before pre-K.' Trip. Yeah, I guess she had a point, didn't she? Bunch of stereotypes all in my head. I remember doing the math like, yeah, I'm good at Little League. A preconceived idea of what it all meant for those that like the same sex had the characteristics." And so, of course, notice, of course, he's making a great point to say that he's not gay, but he is saying we got to be careful of stereotypes. Just because someone acts a certain way doesn't mean that they are homosexual. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that as the discussion goes on. Number 2, he is very much against hate speech or bigotry, particularly when it comes to stuff that we see on the internet or when it comes to hip-hop singing. Now, I'm not a hip-hop artist, or nor do I really care for that genre, but I do know that it's there. He says, if I was gay, I would think hip-hop hates me. Have you read the YouTube comments lately? I think one of the biggest signs of the degradation of America is the conversations that happen on YouTube. My goodness, fools out there. Man that's gay gets dropped on the daily. We become so numb to what we're saying. A culture founded from oppression, yet we don't have acceptance for them. Call each other faggots behind the keys of a message board. A rude worded in hate, yet our genre still ignores it. Gay is synonymous with the lesser. And so again, is it good to have hate speech, to call people this, to degrade them? Not at all. Not at all. And so finally, I think on the positive, in general, he talks about the need for love, compassion, understanding, although as we'll see, he maybe gets that a little bit wrong. But the real heart of the song, is, as far as I see it, is Macklemore presenting the 2 most prominent arguments for same-sex marriage. Now, he's going to do it within the context of a rap song, so it's not going to be very well developed. But what I want to do is look at what he has to say and look at these arguments, the people arguing for gay marriage, and there are other ones, but these are the 2 main ones, and to see how they stand up. So the main argument that he gives is the title of the song. Underneath, it's all the same love. Marriage equality. That marriage between a man and a woman is equal to marriage between 2 men or marriage between 2 women. The problem is, and again, I understand it's a rap song, he never gives an argument why they're equal. He never says they're equal because of this. He just says they're equal. Now, if you know your philosophy, this is the fallacy of begging the question, where you use something that is not proven to prove your point. And so you can't do that. You just can't say, hey, marriage equality, we need to have respect rights. You've got to prove to me why marriage is equal. If I'm going to say that 1 + 1 = 2, I'm going to use this mathematical formula to prove it. But we just can't say, hey, they're equal, it's all the same love, without demonstrating why. Because it just doesn't make sense. Now let's presume that the same love is love of marriage that has sort of a sexual or a bodily component to it. Can we really say, if we factor in the body, that it is the same love? I think there's a challenge. One, because bodies are not the same. A man and a woman's body together is not the same as a man and a man's body or a woman and a woman's body. There's no sexual complementarity. So it really isn't the same. It doesn't have that sexual difference in the body. Number two, it is not truly possible to consummate homosexual love, where a man and a woman come together in the marital act. Their bodies are sort of ordered towards each other according to biology and evolution, where according for homosexuals, there's no consummation. We can arouse each other, but it's not really possible to consummate. It's not equal to heterosexual consummation. And third and finally, stemming from that, it is not naturally inherently possible for homosexual couples in their body to bring forth children. The act doesn't bring forth children by its nature, while heterosexual love is inherently procreative. By its nature, the natural thing that would happen is a child would come forth from that love. So if you count the body, I don't see how it's possible to say that they're equal. It's not the same love. The only way that I think you could say it, and again, Macklemore is not saying this, and I haven't really seen people argue this too much, is if you don't count the body and you don't count sexual difference, where love is nothing more than a feeling. Love is an emotion. Love is a sentiment. Love is like love between friendships. But the fact of the matter is, if the body does count, then the love is not equal. But the result of this is if you say the body doesn't count, it's all the same love, then why isn't polygamy the same? Why isn't incestuous union of a father with his daughter the same? It's all the same love. Because if you say the body doesn't matter and sexual difference doesn't matter, everything goes. Who are you to judge that it's not the same love? Who are you to say that love is not love? If you get rid of the objective standard of sexual difference in the body, then there's nothing really to judge from. And this, y'all, is the heart of the debate. What is marriage? It's not about homosexuality. We could be talking about polygamy. We could talk about incestuous union. We could talk about people wanting to marry themselves. It may sound ridiculous, but it's about what is marriage. Either the body and sexual difference matters for marriage or it doesn't. If it does not matter for marriage, and all marriage is just a feeling and emotion that people share between each other, or willingness to be with each other, then what does it matter who marries whom? Does that make sense? That's the root. And so what this debate is about is not just about feelings. We're talking about changing public policy. We're talking about changing the laws of a nation. You don't just do it because you say #same love. You got to give me a definition of marriage. You got to give a reason. And Macklemore and many of his compatriots simply are not doing that. The second argument that he uses is the other very predominant one of equal rights. That gays have the right to marriage and they're being denied it. So I'll give you the quotes. He really focuses on this. Gender to skin color, the complexion of your pigment, the same fight that led people to walk outs and sit-ins. It's human rights for everybody. There is no difference. When everyone else is more comfortable remaining voiceless, rather than fighting for humans that have had their rights stolen. I might not be the same, but that's not important. It's funny, it might not be the same, but that's not important. But he's saying it's the same. Anyhow, no freedom till we're equal, damn right, I support it. Again, Macklemore is falling into the same problem that he had before. He's saying gays have the right to marriage. He's saying that it's their natural right and they're being denied, but he never gives an argument for it. You just can't say something and think that it's true. You've got to be able to give a reason or a defense of why it's true. That's like me going up to sister and saying, "Sister, that bag is my bag."
No, it's not, Father.
Well, it is my bag.
No, Father, it's not.
It is. if I'm going to get that bag, I'm going to have to give a reason why. I'm going to say, sister, because my name is written into it.
Father, your bag's right here.
Okay. That's our argument against it. So we're having a reasoned discussion. But Macklemore and a lot of people who advocate gay marriage simply aren't doing that. We have a right to do it, a marriage. Okay, then tell me why you have that right. You just can't go claiming you got a right to something and saying you're being denied the rights, playing the victim without giving a reason why. Now, one of the main arguments that we say is, well, we have a right to marry whomever we love. If I love you, I have a right to marry you. Okay, well then that's an argument for polygamy. Are you in favor of polygamy? Or polyandry, that's one woman marrying a bunch of men. Are you in favor of incestuous union? Because love is love, isn't it? You should have a right to marry who you love. Shouldn't then, according to that logic, a man have the right to marry a woman who's married to another man, even if that man disagrees who's married to the woman? Because, hey, love is love. What happens if you remove the standard, everything goes. It's not the slippery slope that this will happen. It's what we call a slippery slope in principle. In principle, you remove the standard of sexual difference in the body, then everything goes. Now, what about this idea of unjust discrimination? Well, does that really work? We've already seen that you've got to prove that you have a right, but we as a culture discriminate all of the time. Think about this, the analogy I'm going to use sort of throughout the talk. Let's say there was someone who's blind. Maybe they were born blind or they lost their sight later on. And they said, I want to drive a taxi cab. I should have the right to drive the taxi cab. You are denying me my right to drive the taxi cab. Is this unjust discrimination? No, it's not. We don't hate this person. We don't think this person's bad. It's not because he's blind, but because we understand that sight is necessary to drive a taxi cab, to drive a car. And because he doesn't have that, then he's not going to be able to do it. It's the same thing with gay marriage. We believe or argue that sexual difference, according to nature and even evolution, is necessary for marriage. And again, the evolution argument is a little bit more extended, but we're not going to get into that now. And therefore, if you don't have the desire to marry someone of the opposite sex, then you don't have the right to marriage. It's not because we hate you or discriminating, it's because of what we understand marriage to be. Again, we discriminate all the time with marriage. You can't marry your sister, you can't marry your father, one man can't marry 5 women, but no one says that's unjust. But again, if it's all the same love, that's discrimination too. That's unjust too. And if you're going to want homosexual marriage, you really, in principle, have got to be for everything. And I think we can all realize, if we're reasonable, that that's utter and complete chaos. It's utter and complete chaos. So it is very, very emotionally charged language. You're denying my rights, the civil rights, and it really riles people up, particularly in our culture. But we need to be able to use our reason. And that's what I've been encouraging this talk and the talk I give later this afternoon on homosexuality. Whatever our feelings and emotions are, we need to take them and put them off to the side. We can't take anything personally. When people begin taking things personally and getting angry and yelling and screaming, we end up in a place that a democracy should not go. We need to be able, even if we disagree, to be able to have reasoned discussion. Otherwise, it ends up in a nasty fight. Now, what Macklemore also does is something that I think is very typically seen, is that he paints those who oppose gay marriage as hateful religious bigots, religious fanatics. Again, you see this very typical. Let's look at some of the examples. I have 3 of them. The right-wing conservatives think it's a decision, and you can be cured with some treatment and religion. And God loves all his children is somehow forgotten, but we paraphrase a book written 3,500 years ago. When I was at church, they taught me something else. If you preach hate at the service, those words aren't anointed. That holy water you soak in has been poisoned. Again, surely there's some truth to this. Now, there are people who are bigots, who are religious fanatics, who misinterpret the Bible. But you'll notice, how many times have I quoted the Bible so far? 0. I will never do it when I'm discussing this. Because it's not at heart a religious argument. At heart it's an argument about the understanding of the meaning of the body and the understanding of the meaning of the purpose of our reproductive system. So we've got to be careful, Macklemore, not to make hasty generalizations and say everybody who opposes is a bigot or a religious fanatic. Sometimes we don't hate. I mean, think of the taxi driver. Because I don't want him to drive that taxi cab, does it mean I hate him? Because I don't want a brother to marry a sister, does it mean I hate them? No. It means that I don't think that's what marriage truly is, nor do I think it is a good choice. But as I said, we can and we must make arguments, good solid arguments, in favor of traditional marriage based in reason alone. You'll never hear me mention the Bible. Why? Because it doesn't really matter. It's important for us as Christians to understand it, but if we're going to dialogue with our peers who don't believe in God or believe in the Bible, why are they going to listen to that? We've got to be able to use reason and understanding of what the body is meant for. In France, there's a big debate right now over gay marriage. They've had 1 million people gather to oppose gay marriage. One of the leaders in the opposition to gay marriage is himself an atheist homosexual. His name is Javier Bongibaud. It's a good French name. You can go read him. So again, here we have an atheist who's a homosexual who's against gay marriage. The actor Rupert Murdoch, he is homosexual, against gay marriage. So to say that everybody is religious is simply false or attacking people. We can argue for what we call the natural law, what the body is meant for, the purposes written into the body. So the tactic, though, that Macklemore is using, and is very often used, is what we call in philosophy the ad hominem attack. Ad against hominem, the person. Instead of dealing with an argument, you attack the person. So I can present you a very good argument why I think traditional marriage is good. You're a bigot. All of a sudden the argument's shut down. Now, wait a second. Don't attack me. Let's look at my argument. You can disagree with my argument, but don't attack me. That's bad logic. That's bad philosophy. But ultimately, that's what happens. Even if I am a bigot and hateful, still deal with my argument. We can deal with my bigotry and hateful nature later on. Still use reason. That's what we do in a democracy. That's what we do as human people. So you got to be careful of it. Because it's a very quick way to shut an argument down or a dialogue down by calling you a name or saying that you're a bigot. But really, what it all comes down to, or his whole song, it comes down to love. Same love. Love is patient. Love is kind. Even he has Mary Lambert quoting scripture, that we need to love other people, that God is love. But love is one of the words that is most used in our society, but very little defined. I can say love this, or I love pizza, I love people, I love the sky, I love God. Does it mean the same thing? Well, we can understand what it means, but there can be some differences to it. And so what's going to be crucial in this song and this debate is understanding what love means. He says it, but he never defines it. Again, it's a rap song. He doesn't have to define it. But what does it mean? True, love is the opposite of hate. When you hate somebody, or you're a bigot or prejudiced, you're not loving them. But love is more than an emotion. Love is more than a feeling. And love doesn't mean encouraging and allowing people to do whatever they want, particularly when it's bad for them. How many times when you were young and you wanted to play with scissors, your dad said, "You can't play with those scissors." "Why not? You don't love me." "No, I do love you, but this is not what's good for you. It's not what scissors are meant for. You're not using them for the proper purpose." And hopefully as a child you get over it and you realize what scissors are meant for. It's like saying I'm being unloving because I won't let Stevie Wonder drive a taxi cab. No, you're blind. I love you, but this is not what's good for you or other people. It's not what is necessary to drive a taxi cab. So I'm going to propose a definition of love. Love, traditionally, is choosing the good for the other person. If I love you, I may not have warm, fuzzy feelings about you, but I want what's good for you. In marriage, people who are married, you may not have all these warm, fuzzy feelings for your spouse, but you're going to stay with them because you want what's good for them. And so I'm willing to choose what's good for you, or want you to choose what's good for you. And sometimes that means when I see you saying, you're making a choice that's not good for you, or a government making a choice that's not good, then we're going to say we're not going to do it. Now, granted, we can have a discussion whether or not it's good for you, and that's a discussion that needs to be had. But we've got to use reason and logic rather than just emotions and feelings. So those who oppose gay marriage basically are loving. They do not think that this is good for the person or it is good for the culture, and can give, I think, some pretty strong arguments why. Love, though, is central, particularly as Christians, Because as much as this debate goes on, we are still called to love, to want what is good for the other person, particularly the individuals out there who do struggle with same-sex attraction. We may not convince them that we love them, but we have got to be very careful that we do show that love and love the person. Because what does the Catechism say? It's very clear from Christ and the Church. Persons with same-sex attraction, this is the Catechism, must be accepted with respect, compassion, and sensitivity. Every sign of unjust discrimination in their regard should be avoided. Don't want hate speech, don't want bigotry, don't want unjust discrimination. But the argument is, it is not unjust to discriminate, saying homosexuals cannot get married because of the nature of what we believe marriage to be and the purpose of our bodies and our sexual functions. Let me close. This is a very, very popular song. I can tell, like, some of the people who are older in here, 20 years ago, you would have never imagined a song like this being on the top of the charts. And again, it's a nice, catchy song, but there are a lot of people out there, particularly young people, who hear the song and hear the argument and don't think through it. Don't analyze the lyrics. Same thing with the news. They hear things, they watch on TV shows, they're not thinking through it. They say, well, I have a friend who's gay, or gays should have rights, and they believe things. Do not believe things just because of slogans. That's the most important thing that y'all need to understand. There are a lot of little catchy little slogans and phrases. It's all over Twitter. Think about it. Particularly, we do not make public policy based on slogans. We don't change laws because of a pop song, because of what people think and feel. We give definitions, we have debate, and we make logical choices. We need to love authentically, love those who do have same-sex attraction. We also need to think, use our brains along with our hearts. That's the issue. When we look from like 10 years ago to now, when there's such a push for gay marriage, granted, there may be some people who really have thought through this and believe the body doesn't mean anything, believe that marriage is this malleable thing. Believe me, there are people who believe that. But we got to be careful not jumping on the bandwagon and not being conformist. Conformist is a person who just goes along with the flow. There are times we may want to go along with the flow, but we need to think about it. And I think that's the big issue. It's conformism, people who just don't think about it, who just feel and go along with it, instead of really entering into dialogue and debate and discussion. So the thing is, about this topic, tell Mr. McElmore, we need to love, but we need to also think, and we need to have it focused on the truth about the human person and about what marriage is. Thank you. So I intentionally made that talk short because I know that we're going to want to have time for questions and whatnot. And I will say, a big crowd, we may not have the time to get everybody. You can come to me later on and we can have a discussion, but I will demand respect and I will demand logical questions. Any personal attacks or histrionics, I'm going to shut you down, okay? And we can talk later. So let's have some good discussion. Yes, sir.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but earlier in your speech you said that the purpose of marriage, one of the purposes was procreation.
One of the purposes, yes.
And sorry, can you list what the other one?
It would be the unitive aspect to bring a stability for the man and the woman in their own lives, particularly for the rearing of offspring, as we've seen sort of from in a human evolutionary sociological perspective.
Okay. A common argument that I don't believe you addressed was what about heterosexual couples who cannot conceive?
It's a very good point. I was going to, but I had to talk. I talk to college students all the time. And they said, "Father, you got to make it a little less long for high school students. Not that y'all are dumber or whatever. They're probably much more smarter than a lot of college students, but that's a good argument. What the argument is basically, well, what about infertile couples? Well, why should they be allowed to get married? Well, what you're doing is you're comparing apples to oranges. Okay, I'm going to give this analogy so people freak out about it. But you got to if you're personally, push your personal opinions aside. When I say that a heterosexual couple is infertile, that means they can't have children. But naturally, if they follow the act through, they would normally be able to have children. There's something wrong, maybe a low sperm count, maybe not enough eggs, I don't know what it is. that makes it difficult for them to have children. But the act is still the same. So what we would say is that they are secondarily infertile. They still have the substance of what it takes to make a child. Under normal circumstances, they could have a child. They could take medicine and have a child, possibly. But when we come to a homosexual couple, the act they engage in is per se, in and of itself, incapable of bringing forth a child. We can call it infertile, but it's not proper. Or we can, because let's say that I say, this mug is infertile. This mug cannot have children. Is this true? It is. It can't. But it doesn't make any sense because it doesn't have the potential in itself, under normal circumstances, to bring forth children. Impossible. And so, the same thing goes with homosexual sex. It does not, in and of itself, have the possibility of bringing forth children. Can't. Never will. Never able to do it. So there is that difference. It's apples and oranges. It seems to make the same sense. So just like it doesn't make any sense to call this infertile, it doesn't make the sense to call homosexual sex infertile because it doesn't have the potential in and of itself to give forth children, while heterosexual sex does in and of itself have the potential to do that. Yes, ma'am.
So I understand why the church's position is that homosexual marriage is incompatible because it's the sacrament of marriage and we as a church see it as a sacrament.
Okay, oh, that's the church's position, but we're not going to superimpose this on a culture.
Okay, right.
Not at all.
That's my question is I understand like that argument, but then why is a civil union not acceptable? Because the state, the country, doesn't have that same definition of marriage.
Okay, very good. That's why, did you hear me bring up the Bible at all? No, I didn't. I didn't talk about the sacrament. I never will. Because we do believe in the sacrament of marriage. But my argument is based in nature. That nature, not nature like animals running around the forest, but the natural ends written into the body. That the sexual organ the sexual has a purpose that's written in nature that is even evolutionarily necessary, that a government has the responsibility to respect that. It's the same thing with abortion. I don't want you to impose your religion on me. No. I can show you from science that's a human being. And that a government ought to respect the natural rights of the child to live from a purely biological order. So the same thing with marriage. All we're saying is that the government ought to respect the natural order and the meaning of sexual difference. It doesn't have the power to redefine marriage. Because if you're saying the government has the power to redefine marriage according to its own whim, it can redefine anything. It can redefine your religious freedom. It can redefine when life begins. It can redefine when life ends. And that's what the government's doing right now. And people are not paying attention. They're taking more and more power away, and they're beginning to level it. This is when life begins. This is when you can do this. This is when you can't do that, instead of respecting the order of nature. And that's what we call soft totalitarianism. And that's where we're headed. People, let's start thinking about things. So that's the argument. We would say the government doesn't have the power to do that. If you allow civil unions, why not allow polygamy? What's wrong with that? The government should allow that too. You've removed the natural standard. It should allow everything. You should be able to marry your brother. That becomes something I don't think people want, but then they become bigots and hypocrites. Because the standard they're using to say we want it is marriage equality. We shouldn't discriminate. Well, then why can you discriminate those people? That's bigotry. I think a lot of people who do advocate it, and this is charged language, fall into the trap of bigotry because they're choosing who they want to discriminate against. I'll go back to you.
Do you believe as a matter of policy we should do away with civil unions, or should that be allowed under law because it doesn't conflict with the definition of marriage?
Well, I think that's splitting hairs, to be technical. I don't agree with civil unions because what it ultimately does is, first of all, why are you saying you people are not good enough for marriage, so we're just going to give you this? I think it's degrading to homosexuals to say we're just going to give you that as like a little concept, like the Ginsu steak knives because you don't win the first prize. Number two, it's just you're using two different terms. It has all the same benefits and everything else as marriage. You're calling it something different. No, I don't think that works because then you have to allow civil unions. Why can't I, for tax purposes, marry my brother because he's having a hard time finding a job, or why can't I marry my dad so that he can escape the inheritance tax? I'm his son now. We'll just do a civil union for tax codes. It opens up so many other possibilities that become very, very problematic. I think it's just messing around with words, so I don't buy that, no.
So what would be the best way to respond to someone who uses
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I think we're supposed to be loving. I come from a generation where we don't take things personally, okay? And I don't want to push it on you. So I hear people make fun of Catholics all the time. I don't really care. I mean, is it wrong? Yeah, but am I going to lose sleep over it? No. I'm not. I can't put my point on you. The only thing that I never get offended, personally. I just never do. If you're going to attack me, then I might get offended. But you just want to say something like that, doesn't bother me at all. But yeah, it may with you. I think you say, listen, you may tell the person very charitably, listen, this is offensive to me. Would you mind respecting me and not using that term around me? And hopefully the person would say yes. But that's what I would suggest. Again, we get into the discussion of what kind of language should be used or not be used. But I do see the point. But I think it begs a deeper question, which is about then, I mean, is it really proper to call someone gay? Is it proper to say someone is a homosexual, or is it more proper to say there's a person with same-sex attraction who experiences same-sex attraction? Should we self-identify with those attractions? My opinion is no, we shouldn't. And I think that's a big part of the problem. We as humans have all sorts of attractions that are not ordered towards the proper end, male to female, that we don't self-identify. And I don't think there's any evidence genetically or scientifically that says we should self-identify. That brings up a different issue.
Like a lot of times when discussing same-sex marriage with another person, they say, well, it doesn't affect you. You're not homosexual, so why do you care? And then if you would say, well, like it's changing laws, and they would say, yeah, but you don't need to worry about that because like you're not going to get married, like you're not homosexual. Like what's a good argument against?
That's a good. There are other arguments, and that is a good one. One of it doesn't affect you. Well, first of all, it does, because you're changing public policy. It does affect me, and it can affect particularly religious freedom, my ability to talk whether or not that I think homosexuality is a sin or not. It'll change tax code. It will have a very, very profound effect. It will also have a profound effect on the children that teachers will be teaching, all this kind of stuff. So just to say it doesn't have an effect, again, that's begging the question. It does have an effect, and we can prove that it has an effect. Second, there are a lot of laws, and again, off the top of my head, I'm having a hard time thinking of it, that like drug laws. Well, what do the drug laws matter to me? I don't do drugs. No. Or rape, I'm not raping people. What do the rape laws matter to me? No, that's a narcissistic, very small-minded way of seeing things. There are a lot of laws that don't directly affect me, but I think that are good because they benefit the whole of a society.
So my girlfriend's mom is like really, really big on marriage equality. If I were to get in like an argument with her about it, how would I get out without ruining the relationship?
Well, how about this? I'm going to be very honest with you. Let's say, granted, you're walking there and you see some guy. How tall are you?
I'm 5'8".
How much do you weigh? Let's say you met a 6'4" guy who's 250 pounds, totally ripped. Would you pick a fight with that guy? Probably not. And you could be David and put that rock right through his head. I probably wouldn't pick a fight with her about it because you maybe don't have the tools necessary to beat her in it because she may not have you may have the reason logic, but
if it happened, how would I get out?
Well, I would say that's a very good question. First of all, I would not get it in the first place, but I would simply say, well, you imagine, well, tell me why, and then let's see whatever answer she has, and then sharpen your skills enough to respond. The book that I suggest is called what is it called? What is Marriage? Man and Woman in Defense. What is Marriage? By a guy Ryan Anderson, Sheriff Girgis, and Robert P. George. You can get it on Amazon. You get the Kindle edition. Very easy to read. What I would do is maybe say, this may really make her mad, give her a copy of the book and say, why don't you read this book and you come back and you tell me. But it's called What is Marriage? It has every argument and it doesn't mention God or Jesus or the Bible once. And
how big is it?
100 pages, pretty easy to read. I mean, pretty easy to read. It's a good challenge, but it lays out all the best arguments.
So I guess what I'm wondering is, what should we as faithful Catholics who want to be in how should our consciences be formed in this regard?
Well, I think your conscience be formed according to the natural law. And again, we're just living in a time where people are very sensitive. Sometimes we may need to push their buttons a little bit. It's like the person who's an alcoholic who thinks that I should just drink, do whatever I want to do. We realize it's not good for them. Sometimes we need to sit them down and say, I love you, but hey, this is not the best for you. They may get mad at you, but you got to speak the truth. Always in love, never judging them, never ridiculing them. But I think a big part of it comes what I'm going to talk about the next time, which is the talk that probably should have come before this one, of where does homosexuality really come from, and what is it as a social and ethical phenomenon. If we can understand that better, it puts this in a better perspective. That's my suggestion. Anything else? So listen, if anybody wants to talk personally about this issue, I'll be around. I'm doing some work on my phone with a big project back at home, but I'll be around. Feel free to come talk to me. I'm not going to judge or condemn, but I want y'all to think. See y'all later.